This week on A Lively Experiment, the governor's pick to join the Rhode Island Ethics Commission abruptly takes his name out of the running. We'll tell you why. And what presence should police officers have in schools? We'll hear both sides of the argument.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen-White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, attorney and former state representative Nick Gorham, Harrison Tuttle, president of the Black Lives Matter Rhode Island Political Action Committee, and Steph Machado, Boston Globe reporter and Rhode Island PBS weekly contributor. Hello and welcome to Lively. I'm Jim Hummel. Governor McKee's pick for the State Ethics Commission had 6 women accuse him of sexual harassment, including town employees and a member of the school committee, while he was on the South Kingstown Town Council. Intense media coverage of those incidents forced the resignation of Bryant DeCruz less than 24 hours after the allegations came to light and before he was scheduled to be sworn in. In perhaps the understatement of the year, the governor's office said the vetting process was not adequate. Nick, we've seen a lot of this before. This one, I don't know what's worse, that maybe the governor's office knew about this and went ahead with it anyway, or maybe didn't know altogether. What's your take on this?
Well, it was a little odd. There's clearly a lack of vetting, but one of the things that I discovered, just looking at campaign finance, sometimes you can
because that's what you do late at night.
The DNA of appointments and things like that. I looked up the campaign donations of Mr. DeCruz, and he's made quite a few, but they're usually small. But just a few months before his appointment, he made a $1,000 donation to Governor McKee's campaign back in April. So, for someone being appointed to the Ethics Commission, that just seems like kind of a little bit of an anomaly, a little bit odd. So maybe it was on the wrong track from the beginning.
What do you think, Harrison?
Yeah, clearly this is another case in which, we have constant mistakes going on in the governor's office here in Rhode Island, particularly this one. Sexual assault anywhere in any workplace should not be allowed, and the vetting process should have been better. And, this is yet another bad look on our state when it comes to not going through the proper channels. And, we've seen this with the Armory and multiple cases of sexism and racism going on. And so this is yet another situation, and it's only highlighted by the fact that he was a potential appointee by the Board of Ethics.
Great reporting by the Globe.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's obviously an example of good journalism that brought to light these allegations, which were alarming. But something that I learned from this was I didn't actually realize that Ethics Commission members are appointed by the governor with no confirmation process. They're not confirmed by the Senate. And I'm not suggesting that they should be, because that adds another layer of politics, as we know. But it makes it even more important that they are very carefully vetted, because they are appointed, and then that's it.
He would have sailed right through. The other thing, the skeptic in me from a reporter standpoint is, so we taped last week, and then on Friday, right after this was all beginning to materialize, it was kind of the governor's office did a quick mea culpa, and then I didn't really hear any follow-up. And all of a sudden, the independent man's coming down on Monday morning. So the next available time for reporters to talk to him was when the independent man was coming down. So that's the skeptic in me, but I never heard the governor really address this. It was kind of a quick statement, and they tried to move on.
Well, the stagecraft for independent man was pretty good.
Yeah.
But still... Yeah, I suppose he might have lined it up that way. But, I think what Harrison said is true. I mean, there have been a few of these kind of absent-minded appointments. I don't know how else to characterize it, where they did not do their diligence. And luckily, the press finds out about a lot of these things. Thank goodness for the press.
I think a lot of Rhode Islanders are frustrated, too, right? Because this kind of feeds into what people already think happens in government, which is I donate to your campaign and you appoint me to a big board position. It's just not a good look in the state. And, I think in certain things like this, maybe it could entertain potential legislation in the General Assembly.
See, people seem to be more blasé about that, Nick. I mean, it sounds like $1,000. Is it a quid pro quo? But, whatever. But it seems like it's almost like you have to be a benefactor, and there's so much pressure to raise money these days that seems like the very minimum. It didn't seem like that 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know how you can regulate it. Under the Supreme Court decisions, it says people can give whatever they want, however much they want, to the political causes they believe in. But, when it's kind of blatant, I think people should know, and I think people can pass judgment themselves. That's why we have elections. But it would be very tough to regulate, I think. But I'm glad I found it.
Yeah, the 1,000. All right, there has been a lot of discussion both locally and nationwide about having school resource officers, policemen in schools across the country, particularly with the increasing number of school shootings. Our own Steph Machado here put together a story for Rhode Island PBS Weekly that you can see this weekend. We condensed it a little bit to set the table for the discussion. Here's a little bit of what Steph reported on.
Rhode Island PBS Weekly asks superintendents across the state where they stand on having SROs in their districts. About half of those who got back to us said they'd prefer to have more SROs, ideally one at each school. There are roughly 65 SROs in Rhode Island and more than 300 public schools. Would you like to have an SRO in every school here in Lincoln?
Ideally, that would be nice. Having an SRO at every level really adds to the budget. So if a community is going to get behind it, they have to get behind it with funding as well.
Recent polling shows support for SROs in Rhode Island. A University of Rhode Island survey released in October asked Rhode Island adults about a variety of policy topics, including if they would support legislation to provide state funding for police officers in schools. 57% of those polled either strongly or somewhat approved, while 15% strongly or somewhat disapproved, and 22% were neutral.
We're not opposed to a model in which police officers get called to schools whenever there's an issue. We understand the difficulties that schools go through, whether it's a person having a gun inside the school or someone that is a threat to others. That is not what we're contending. We're contending that the problem is that we have police officers oftentimes being in higher numbers here in Rhode Island than we actually do social workers.
The groups opposing SROs use the slogan, "Counselors, not cops," arguing mental health professionals are better equipped to de-escalate situations. So when they say counselors, not cops, you would say?
There's absolutely a need for more counselors and school psychologists, no question about it. There is an equal need for school resource officers, in my opinion.
So counselors and cops?
Yes, yeah.
You can watch Steph's entire piece on student resource officers on Rhode Island PBS Weekly this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. or online at ripbs.org/weekly. Steph, let me begin with you. Where did this idea come from? I know the discussion's been out there, and it's a classic. You got both sides, and coincidentally, we had Harrison too. So we've got some of that.
It's just a coincidence that he's in the piece and he's on the panel today. The idea actually came from Barbara, the executive director, and it's something that I had been covering for a number of years as well. Just this debate, especially in Providence, about should we have police officers in schools, should we not? There's been a movement for at least a decade now to get rid of police officers in schools. It has not been successful in any way. We still have school resource officers here in Rhode Island. And I really wanted to know, okay, so what is the landscape of SROs right now? What are they doing in the schools? And I sent an email to every superintendent in the state to ask them some questions about their SRO program. And I found out some interesting things. And if you watch the piece on Sunday, you'll see I feature an SRO in the Bristol Warren schools who has brought a therapy dog into the school. And he's very cute, the dog, who is helping students who have mental health crises, who have anxiety, especially coming out of the pandemic, helping calm them down, helping with their social emotional needs, of course, in conjunction with social workers and counselors and other types of resources. And I thought that was really interesting because 10, 20 years ago, when you heard about a school resource officer, you thought of them as more of someone who's there to be an authority figure, who's there to, of course,
discipline.
discipline or also be there just to stop a bad guy who's coming into the school with a gun. And we're seeing sort of this new wave of school resource officers who are more passionate about supporting and helping the students. The SROs actually formed an association last year for the first time to try and get on the same page about all these things. At the same time, groups like the Black Lives Matter, PAC, and the ACLU remain concerned that some officers are continuing to remain disciplinarians, and they want to see changes to that.
So, and you'll see this in the full piece, is your issue the discipline or the fact that they're armed in school? Talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of both, right? We have teachers that are in classrooms that will defer to SROs to be able to handle behavioral health issues that, maybe be better handled by a social worker or a counselor, an alternative way. But it was interesting, and I'm not sure if it was in the piece, but we found data that would support the fact that police officers, SROs, who are armed within schools actually increase the likelihood of a school shooter coming into the school and inflicting more mass casualties because of the idea that you're being met with another gun or another form of violence, as well as we see data to suggest that shooters, particularly school shooters, will go into schools that they have already attended in the past. And so, the big thing that we want to make sure is that the kids feel safe. And we're hearing from a lot of students within Providence and urban districts that they don't feel safe with an SRO. But we also want to make sure that kids are able to go to school and have the protection from, external threats. And I think, one of the things that we find a solution in this is making sure that police officers are outside of inside the school, making sure that they can respond to a potential threat from, outside of campus where there's an immediate response. But there's an overwhelming fear within urban districts that police officers are going to inflict harm on students of color that, we've seen in the past.
Well, first, I think it should be left to the discretion of the local school committee, whether they, and I believe that's the current state of the law. I think school committees, they're elected because they have a connection that the voters have observed, a connection that they have with the schools, the local schools, and they're fit to run them. So I think a lot of the SRO questions can be answered by school committees. And I think Harrison's brought up some valid issues, but I think those can be addressed locally.
But it also seems like there may be a disconnect between the urban core and maybe out in, if you're in Bristol, like you talked about with the dog, or in a South Kingstown or a Cumberland.
Yes and no, because one of the first things, because I spoke to the ACLU for the piece that's going to run in the Globe, and one of the first cases they brought up was something that happened in Narragansett, where a student flipped the bird to a police officer, and the officer took him to the ground and arrested him, and there ended up being a lawsuit that was settled this year. So I think there have been incidents that happen in towns in addition to the urban core. But yes, certainly in the urban core, there have been more concerns with, for example, we've seen students bring weapons to school in Providence, or we've seen students in Pawtucket get into altercations with school resource officers, for sure.
I get the concern about the discipline, and you talked about that in the piece too, about you can't substitute, the officer's going to be like, look, that's your issue, we're just here for other things. But what about the argument that if there is a school shooter there, to have somebody armed in the building when seconds count, let alone minutes, as opposed to calling somebody and it's 5 minutes and he can't get in the building and all of that. What about that? Because we've seen that on college campuses too. There's a big, after Virginia Tech all those years ago. So what about that argument to have an officer in the school armed and ready to go?
Yeah, it's a situation where, I think conventional thought, and certainly something that I personally thought would be, we need an officer immediately to respond. But there was a report that was put out since 1999 with the school shooting in Columbine all the way to now that suggests that, having an SRO does not prohibit any school shooter from creating mass casualty.
But they could be there to take him down
They
quicker,
could.
no?
They could, and actually, but data also suggests that there have been more instances in which teachers have submitted or has restrained school shooters than SROs, and this is given over a 20-year period. This isn't, isolated incidents. And so for us, it's one of those things where we have to look at the data. We have to make sure that not only people feel safe, but people are safe. And I think sometimes those two things are conflated.
In the report that he's referencing, I'll say, also acknowledged that they cannot count if any school shootings were prevented because of the presence of an armed officer in the school.
It's a financial issue too, because Steph's piece talked about, 65 versus 310 schools. There was a big, after every mass shooting, it seems that let's get school resource officers at every school. It's not tenable for the local towns, right? Because then you have to we have a hard enough time getting police officers to round out minimum manning to begin with, right?
Yeah, but if the proliferation of these mass murders in schools show anything, it's that it doesn't necessarily happen in the urban core. It happens everywhere. And so that's why I know many of the outlying towns have SROs. I believe they have one in Situate. I believe they have one in Foster, Gloucester.
They have one at Barrington High School.
It's almost every single town.
It's almost, I think it's almost impossible
but not
to
every
predict.
School.
Not
every
every
town,
school.
but every school.
It's impossible to predict what a crazy person with a gun is going to do. And that's really the essence of the problem with these school shootings, is that no matter what you do with the Second Amendment, you've got to stop crazy people from having guns. And we haven't been able to do that as a society.
And I think, the Counselors Not Cops movement, I think if there is one clear thing that we can go from that we're hearing from superintendents, it's more counselors in schools.
Well, I think in general, you have cops get sent to so many, and we've talked about this post George Floyd and even before, cops get sent to so many situations where you really need a professional. They've become the de facto mental health counselor.
Yeah.
Anything that surprised you when you were reporting this? Anything that stood out to you?
I think actually something that surprised me was how much the two sides of this issue actually agree on a lot of things. They all believe that we need better mental health resources in schools. They all believe that we need more counselors in schools. I think there's a debate about whether police should be in schools and how exactly they should be used in schools. But the goal of everyone I spoke to was the same, which was to support students. It's just how we get there and how we do it properly.
Okay, again, make sure you see Steph's full piece Sunday night on Rhode Island PBS Weekly. The other big issue, it's been an ongoing issue, housing in Rhode Island, the soaring prices. The increases here for apartments are one of the highest in the country, if not the highest. We're also going, Harrison, let me begin with you on this. We're going into the winter season with the homeless. We could probably do 2 hours on housing, but the legislature has passed some laws to try to make it easier to relax some zoning codes in various towns. Narragansett particularly is pushing back a little bit on that, and I think you're going to see that.
Yeah, we're seeing that all throughout the state when it comes to local municipalities feeling like they were left out of this process. Of course, we have, Representative June Speakman, who represents Warren, in which the Warren Council felt like, hey, you can come to us, and that wasn't the case, or at least that's what they're saying. And so there may have to be revisions within particular legislation that, I think some municipalities have felt was poorly written. But I think at the end of the day, I think all of us agree, as every single year happens, that there's a real homelessness issue here in Rhode Island. It's the affordability of things, and it's folks that, can't afford to live in every town, never mind, places like Providence or Cranston. And so, certainly, we allocated a lot of money this year towards housing, but, I don't think that we stop there. I think we continue to find new ways to provide folks shelter in the short term as well as in long term.
Well, when I was in the General Assembly, one of the most oft-repeated mantras was we shouldn't be doing things as one size fits all. This new law, Harrison is right, it's a one size fits all. It is the paradigm of a one size fits all, because what they've done, what the General Assembly did last year, in essence, is they removed all discretion for local zoning boards and planning boards and town councils who create the zoning ordinances. They eliminated all that discretion, and now there's one rule. It's been created by the General Assembly, and you have to follow it. And of course, there's going to be a lot of blowback, I think, especially when people start seeing the effect of this legislation. You know, there are a lot of towns in this state that have a lot of beautiful open space that could be preserved so that everybody in the state can enjoy it. That's going to be less and less likely because the most vulnerable towns, as I understand it from planning people, are the towns that have the most land that hasn't been developed. So be interesting how this plays out. I don't think you're going to see the end of towns saying this is crazy with Narragansett.
Are you going to see litigation, do you think? Or is it state law and you got to follow it?
Well, the General Assembly is the supreme rulemaking authority of the state, and it's going to be hard to challenge the law. This is well within their wheelhouse to do this. I think you're going to see a lot of very angry people once they start seeing the manifest effects of this law.
Yeah, and I think we're just going to keep seeing this push-pull between the state and local municipalities because there is a massive housing crisis, and we do need more housing as soon as possible.
That's the only thing that's going to bring the rents down is if there's too many, right? But you can't.
I'm not an
overnight.
economist, but it's going to help. It would help.
But you pay your rent every month, don't you?
Oh, I sure do. And you know, the General Assembly was answering this call from everyone practically that we need to build more housing, do something about this. And so I think there will be more laws that the state imposes upon towns and cities, and they're going to push back because they want to retain local control. And I think what I would be watching is how much is this going to slow down the production of new housing because municipalities and the state government are fighting.
What do you think about Johnson & Wales, and we may see some other colleges do this, so many kids take up off-campus housing that Johnson & Wales says you need to do 3 years on campus and that might free up some apartments. What do you think about that? Anything?
I think it's going to be a part of the solution, hopefully. I think for many college kids that are within school, the affordability of things, whether they're on campus or off campus, I don't know how much that really makes a difference to them based on a lot of the kids that are going into school now. But we've got to make sure that we work with universities, Brown University, URI, colleges all throughout the country are trying to find ways to meet their community's needs while also meeting, folks increasingly going to school. And I think if we take the approach of working with municipalities and the universities that they are in, we're going to be able to come up with some sort of solution. But I mean, it's not going to be the solution that is going to solve all of our issues.
Okay, let's go to outrages and/or kudos, and then we have a couple of other things that we want to get to. Nick, let's begin with you this week. Outrage or kudo?
Well, I think I'll just do a kudo this week. I've used it before, but it's really nice to see. There's so much new work in this state that the DOT has, constructed beautiful new roads. And the graffiti, I could swear the graffiti pace has slowed down, or where it's been defacing our beautiful highways that we've spent so much money on as taxpayers, they've been painted over by the DOT. It's really nice to see that. I don't know what maybe it's Peter Alvidi's program to end the graffiti. I don't know, but it's really nice to see.
The good guys keeping up with the bad guys, right?
So far.
It's a constant battle.
So far.
Steph, what do you have?
I do have a kudos for part-time Westerly resident Taylor Swift, who was named Time Person of the Year. And before our viewers, write me off, go read the timepiece of the Person of the Year decision. What she has done for the music industry, for the economy,
for the NFL,
for the craft bead friendship bracelet industry. I mean, of course she's a brilliant singer-songwriter, and I'm a fan. Full disclosure. I think it was a year where women and girls came together, and the Barbie movie was part of that and everything. But I think it was a great move, and people are totally criticizing the Person of the Year choice.
Oh, I thought it was a bold choice.
And I thought it was really, I thought it was the right choice.
Yeah.
Not one person did not talk about Taylor Swift this year.
Yeah.
And so people should go read the article because it was really good.
Definitely.
I was talking to my mom, and my mom said, "Why is Taylor Swift why out of all?"
Tell her to read the Time magazine
You gotta read the
article.
story.
Exactly.
The Wall Street Journal, one of the columnists, said exactly what you just said. She was an economic force everywhere she went, all over the world.
Yeah, she has
More
an
than just another
international-
rock star, put it that way.
She has an international tour next year, and countries are begging her to come to their country so that they can feel the economic effects that cities in the U.S.
Yeah,
felt.
you bet.
She's
Right.
her own little GDP. What do you got?
I just want to give kudos during this holiday time to all the families that are putting food on the table for their kids, and I know a lot of people are going through some financial hardships, and we want to keep doing the good work, and hope that everybody have a good holidays.
3 kudos. All right, I'm in a holiday spirit. You know, I normally
happy
don't like
Hanukkah
the
to our
cut. Yeah,
viewers who
happy
celebrate.
Hanukkah. It started on Thursday night. Let's go. It would not be a show with Steph Machado if we didn't have an update on cannabis. How many times do we talk about it's going to get legalized, that it's going to take a year to get the commission picked? Now I read your story and I'm stunned that it's been a year already. I mean, the time is flying by. So bring us up to date. The point of your story was, how was the first year? Was it on target? And what are the projections going forward?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't have the November numbers yet, so I only had 11 months of sales data, not 12. But the first 11 months, $63 million worth of recreational cannabis was sold. That doesn't include the medical. And it's probably on track to be about $70 million for the first year, which is roughly on track with projections. They didn't meet projections for last fiscal year, so their projections for this fiscal year, I think they were more realistic. And so right now they seem to be on track with what the state thought the sales would bring in. But, we still don't have new stores open, and it sounds like maybe we won't even have new stores open in 2024. We'll have to see. The new Cannabis Control Commission has not actually taken over the industry because of the long delay to name this commission, and now they are coming up with their rules and regulations, including how they will decide who gets these 24 new licenses to sell cannabis.
And a lot of those businesses were complaining that, look, we're all ramped up and ready to go, and we might have to go out of business because we can't wait forever.
Yeah, and you're referring to the cultivators, the people who are
Right.
growing cannabis. So, they're a little bit happier because the medical marijuana dispensaries are allowed to sell recreational. So now the cultivators at least have more places to sell their product. We have 7 medical/recreational dispensaries that are open, but there's supposed to be these other 24 stores that were in the law that passed in May of 2022, and we're not really close to having those stores open yet. They haven't even come up with the rules of how they're going to pick them.
I wondered whether the state was going to tax itself out because it's so expensive. I mean, we've always joked, people say, why don't I just go to my dealer because it's a lot less expensive. Not my dealer, but maybe your dealer. But people seem to be willing to pay the money.
I think the reason that the state legalized cannabis is they wanted the money. It certainly couldn't have been for the welfare of young Rhode Islanders because it's decimating them.
20 seconds, Harrison?
Yeah, I think part of the piece of legislation that maybe is not talked about on the financial end is the expungement element and the worker cooperatives. Haven't really seen a lot of updates regarding that, and would like to see there would be some movement. There are folks that have been locked up due to the war on drugs that are still not out of prison.
Well, you're not doing SRO pieces. Maybe that's your next. He's giving you a follow-up.
It's a really good point, and some of those 24 new stores are supposed to go to the worker co-ops.
All right, that is all the time we have. Nick and Harrison and Steph, great to see you. Folks, come back here next week as a lively experiment continues. We hope you have a great week and a good weekend.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.